This story still haunts the man who survived Room 27. In 2016, I worked as a temporary night guard at an abandoned hospital in a small state. The building had been closed for years after a string of mysterious fires and unexplained accidents. It was never demolished, just left standing, like a corpse waiting for someone to uncover its secrets. The first time I stood before its towering shell, I felt its blackened walls were hiding stories no one wanted to hear. The windows were shattered, and the cold air seeping from inside felt different, as though it carried the breath of the past. During my first week, I began to hear strange sounds, whispers that brushed against my ears, the trickle of water even though the pipes were dry, and sometimes slow, deliberate footsteps on the fourth floor. The floor once known as the psychiatric ward. I tried to ignore it all, but something inside me screamed this place was not as empty as everyone believed. One night, during a short break, I met a retired nurse who had worked there decades ago. We sat together outside the building, his eyes fixed on it, as if he could still hear the cries of the patients. He said to me in a trembling voice, "If you hear anything from the fourth floor, don't go up. And remember, room 27 must always remain closed." When I asked him why, he hesitated, then whispered, "The last patient placed there never left the hospital." Then he rose abruptly, as if afraid he had already said too much. The nights dragged on. On the third night, the power suddenly went out and everything drowned in darkness, except for the pale glow of my flashlight. I felt the building breathing with me. I had no choice but to climb to the fourth floor to check. And with every step up the stairs, the silence grew heavier. When I reached the landing, I heard it, a whisper clear as day. "What are you doing here?" I froze where I stood, my flashlight trembling in my hand. I began opening the doors one by one. The first was empty, the second empty, but at room 27, the door was half open. I was certain I had locked it tight the night before. I pushed it open slowly, the hinges groaning like something in pain. Inside, the room was bare except for a rusted iron bed and an old heart monitor still wired to the wall. Then, suddenly, the monitor came to life, as though someone was lying on the bed right now. I lifted my flashlight toward the far corner. There, I saw the shadow of a man, tall, thin, standing with his face pressed against the wall. He didn't move. He didn't make a sound. He just stood there, as if punishing himself. I stepped forward once, and the monitor flatlined into silence. The shadow remained. I aimed the beam directly at the corner, but the room was empty, completely empty. I stumbled back into the hallway, my heart pounding out of my chest. But just before I left, I turned once more. The door was closing slowly, and through the small window at its top, I saw a shadow moving inside. From that night on, I refused to return to the fourth floor. I confined my patrols to the ground floor and the yard, trying to convince myself that what I had seen was nothing more than exhaustion playing tricks on me. But every night, exactly at 3 a.m., I heard footsteps above my head. 2 weeks later, I quit the job, but the story didn't end there. An email arrived from an unknown address. Inside was a photo from a night surveillance camera showing me standing inside room 27 beside the bed, staring down at someone lying on it. The strange thing was, I had no memory of ever going back there. 2 days later, a small envelope arrived at my home with no return address. Inside was a printed copy of the same photo, but this time, the tall, thin man was standing right behind me, his hand resting on my shoulder.